this is a problem that I have been thinking about since I came here in 2006. And so I wanted to share some of my thoughts, and then I wanted to hear some of yours. So, the first thing I've been doing is kind of observing what all the problems are, and these are the ones that I've come up with so far. The first is information. I think being inside of the Valley for the longest time, I didn't realize how much proprietary information there is here. You know, Plato raised $2 million coming out of demo day, and I don't think many people in America understand that you can do that. I think there's a lot of proprietary information about how risky it is to start a startup, how risky it is to fail, and common pitfalls and common on-ramps that just aren't available to everyone. The second one is golden handcuffs. How many of you work at a company that's worth over $1 billion? Raise your hand. You know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. Companies are really good at retaining their workers. And one of the things that I've seen very specifically, talking to a young black founder who's 26 who works at EA, he says every 6 months he gets a bonus in the form of stock that vests over 4 years. Well, how are you supposed to leave when there's a theoretical $1 million of accumulated stock that you need to wait to get? That was a very well-designed retention plan that will basically get him to never leave. The second thing is because you have that stock, it feels like savings. So people actually increase their spending because they think we have this money sitting out here in the form of stock. And so they never save up enough money that they can quit their jobs. Tech companies are great at this. The third is San Francisco is not the East Coast. I have met very few people who actually really enjoy living here. I consider it like a work city. Like you come here to work. And so what are the great qualities of work city? Well, it's not that interesting. And most nights you can just go home and watch Netflix and prepare for work again. The next, friends and family money. Literally, the number of companies that come into YC and they've raised just some little taste of money that allows them to get going is the majority. And I think that that's particularly hard for underrepresented founders. That goes hand in hand with student loans and other family obligations. If someone is giving you a $100,000 a year job out of school and people in your family need your support, it's very hard to consider doing a startup. The sixth is network. I never really understood this. I think it's kind of an old-fashioned idea that VCs think that there's value in networking to them. And so as a result, they automatically limit the group of people who they can interact with, and therefore they limit the problems that they can fund. I think in the 90s and earlier, it took a lot more money to build software companies. And certainly when these were hardware companies, it took more money still. And so that rule actually worked very well. I think nowadays it's so cheap to build software that it turns out you should be judging people on execution, not networking. But I don't think the VCs have caught up yet. If they had, YC would not exist. And then the last, friends and family advice. I think that friends and family are awesome at giving advice 99% of the time. And when it comes to starting companies, they're absolutely horrible and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Literally, I remember there was this amazing team, this great programmer, Cuban immigrant. His sister had a PhD, his dad had a PhD, his mom had a PhD, his brother was studying to have a PhD. He left UPenn to join a company that applied to YC, got into YC, and then he emailed me and told me I can't go. And I was like, well, why not? He says, my dad will not let me. He was 19 years old. He was already an amazing programmer. I think he started programming when he was 11. He could get a job anywhere. UPenn was not helping him at all. And I had to get on the phone and talk to his dad, and I had to say, we're going to watch out for your son. Like, it's going to be okay. And it worked out, you know, they're doing okay. But needless to say, you wouldn't ask your friends and family how to get into the NBA because none of them are probably professional basketball players. But unfortunately, friends and family seem all too qualified to give you advice on your career or your startup career, which is often ill-formed. So when I think about YC, I think about like structurally, how do we try to solve these problems? The first thing is that all of our information, all of our advice, our deal, our everything is online and free. If you go to Sequoia's homepage, it doesn't look like the most information-rich place. And we don't believe that this information is doing any good being behind any type of doors. So when we write blog posts, when we write content, when we do podcasts, all that stuff is open. And thankfully, we have about 3,500 alumni who help us spread that content as well. The second one, golden handcuffs. That's one we've been brainstorming on, and I'd love some feedback on. I've had two ideas. One idea is the kind of pie in the sky, try to popularize a benefit, an employee benefit that would allow someone to leave the company for a year and have their job preserved. I don't think companies are going to do that. The second one is a little bit crazier, which is after you get an offer letter, standard language that basically requires this as one of your benefits as an individual. And if that company really wants you, they have to be okay with this term. I think a lot of companies would hate us for that, but I think it's an interesting idea. And we'd make it somewhat like, you have to work at the company for 3 years and yada, yada, yada. But I do think that such a small group of people actually really deeply want to be founders, that those people are probably better off being free from the golden handcuffs. And we would try to convince companies that that would be a really good benefit. The third problem being San Francisco sucks. The way that I think we try to solve that is by funding companies in a batch. The vast majority of YC founders are not from here, and they don't know anyone here. And putting them in a room together with a bunch of other people is the best thing that we can do to make them at least feel a little bit like this is a reasonable community that they can be a part of, they can have friends. The next one, friends and family money. We fund companies that are very early. It's really tricky to try to convince people of this because I think a lot of people look at YC and they say, oh, you have to have revenue. There are all these like rules to get into YC that I don't even know about, and I work at YC. But we've literally funded a company who didn't write their first line of code, who had just graduated from school, and who literally left the interview where they got in and quit their jobs. So we funded companies with not one line of code. At least to say, if you're not one line of code in and it's been 2 years, we probably won't get funded. But we fund companies that are ridiculously early. And what's interesting is that we price them differently, we work with them differently, they still raise money, they still do well. So that's how we try to solve the you don't have access to friends and family money. The next one, with student loans and other obligations. The combination of giving companies $120,000 up front when they're very early, and the fact that Demo Day works really well. Demo Day, approximately $150 to $200 million is raised every Demo Day. Basically means that you can actually pay yourself a salary. One of the biggest misconceptions of a startup is you can't actually afford to work in a startup because you can't pay yourself a salary. And YC companies don't have to deal with this problem. The next one is networking. I hate networking. I find it to be the most horrible thing. YC is an open application. There are all of these rumors and innuendos about how you actually have to network to get into YC, which I love because, once again, I'm on the inside and I don't want to be networked with, and we regularly accept many companies. So, needless to say, I think we were really the first organization to just say, fill out this application, and anyone can come through our front door. And that was at a time where VCs didn't put their address on their websites because they absolutely didn't want anyone coming in the front door. And then the last one, parents, that's just hard. I'll get on the phone with any of your parents or anyone else's parents, but that one doesn't scale as well. With that being said, those are the things we've done structurally. And I think our results are okay, but they should be a lot better. In the last 5 batches since we've been tracking, we've funded 250 female founders and 175 Black and Hispanic founders. Those numbers are way below representation. They're way higher than YC used to do, but there's a lot of work to be done. In the most recent batch, we had about 150 companies participate out of approximately 8,000 companies who applied. They came from 23 countries. 35% of them were not from the United States. 27% of the companies had a female founder, and 16% of the batch was female. 13% of the companies had a Black or Hispanic founder, and 9% of the batch was Black and Hispanic. The one thing that I think we've done well now is that when you walk into a room at YC, there will be people who look like you. And I can't say that's what it was like before. Will there be a room full of people who look like you? No. But will there be people who look like you? Yes. If you want to go out to dinner with only female YC founders, you can fill up a restaurant with them. If you want to go to dinner with only Black YC founders, same thing. Strangely, to accomplish this, the most effective direct efforts have all been massively unscalable. I answer every email. It's kind of a weird thing to do. But the number of companies that have gotten into YC because they've emailed me is huge. Because they email me, and then if they're interesting, I tell them you should apply. And usually that's all they need to apply, and then they get in because they're doing well. And so one of the lessons I've learned is that you actually have to have someone on the other side of the pitch. You know, like a lot of these founders are actually trying to reach out, and you can do all the outreach and events and yada yada yada. But when somebody emails you, if you don't reply, you're never going to know what happens. The other thing that we do is we hold open office hours whenever we go on tour. So any founder can apply to attend these office hours. And then the last thing we do is we ask our alumni for recommendations. Last batch, I think there were 1,500 recommendations to the batch. And what that does is, in effect, as you diversify the alumni base, it continues to diversify because they're recommending their friends. So that's what we've done. Needless to say, absolutely nowhere close to done with this work, and there's a lot more to do. But it's been really fun to work on. And I think for me, what's amazing is like YC clearly changes people's lives. Sometimes when you meet a founder, you know they're in YC before they know. And so you look at them and you say, oh man, your life's about to change. You're about to move, you have to call your parents, all kinds of craziness is about to happen and you don't even see it. And to be able to do that for someone who is not represented out here, who feels like this place is just a closed door, it's just like 10 times more fun. So yeah, that's what we do at YC. Love to answer questions or hear your thoughts about what we could do better, what you guys have seen work. But that's what we do so far. Thank you.
Go on slido.com, this time it works, and upvote the questions you want to see answered. Otherwise, we'll be taking live questions with this mic. Does anyone have a question already that they would like to ask? Otherwise, we can start with the Slido questions.
What's the biggest YC success founded by an underrepresented minority? Well, probably me. Twitch sold for about $1 billion in 2014. So yeah, there you go. Next question. Question? This is the best. What is diversity for you? I don't really like these kinds of questions. Like, I don't go to many of these types of events, and I don't talk about diversity a lot because I actually think the work is in interacting with individual people. And I feel as though there's kind of two roles in the Valley. One role is to kind of shed light on the problem, and one role is to get out there and solve it. And so there are people who are much better at talking and much better at shedding light on the problem. They do that really well. So diversity for me is funding underrepresented founders, literally. If I do that enough, things will change.
Woo. We'll take a live question right now. I think we have one.
Live question.
Hi, I also put this on Slido so you can erase that. But I was wondering, what are some of the best startups that you've seen tackle the diversity problem? What are kind of the best ideas out there? Thank you.
I have a horribly horrible answer for you. I don't know. And that's kind of two parts. One, it's really hard for me to point to a company who is clearly hitting home runs on this space. And two, strangely, I actually split this issue up into two separate issues. There's the issue of like, how do you diversify the workforce of a functioning company? And then there's the issue of how do you get more underrepresented founders starting companies? Oftentimes they're shoved into like the tech diversity header, but I actually think they're two extremely different things. Strangely enough, I could diversify a typical startup in the Valley that goes through YC with the people who are already in the Valley. Like, my numbers do not have to be big to make a huge difference. Google's got tens of thousands of employees. They've got to figure out way different solutions than I do. I've got to convince the engineers who are already here to take off the golden handcuffs. What about folks who are here on visas? Yeah, so we definitely see this a lot. In my last company, we had, we spun out a company called SocialCam, and one of the co-founders of that company was French and on a visa. At YC, we're actually just very liberal about immigration. So we have a whole host of immigration attorneys that we work with. We have all of these standard documents that we can help our founders get O1 visas. And the process of going through YC actually helps you get an O1 visa. Also, is this recorded? Is this recorded? We probably do some things as well that I wouldn't want to say too publicly to also help these founders. And there are a lot of secrets and hacks in the immigration system that our international founders share with one another. That I don't know too much about. But needless to say, we funded so many international founders that we do a lot of work kind of behind the scenes here. And then we've also actually tried to change the laws. And so there have been a number of laws that we've kind of been very quietly attempting to modify. Next question.
I have a live question. Also asked on Slido, so if you can't hear it, then I guess delete it. But how, you mentioned some real diversity numbers, which I think is awesome. How did you get those? Did you ask people to self-identify, or do you have any hints for how companies can do that?
That's super tricky. So that's extremely tricky. We ask people to identify male or female in the application, but it's optional. So that makes things a little bit more difficult. The one advantage we have is that we have an internal Facebook at YCombinator called Bookface. And and so everyone uploads their photos, and also you, as a group partner, when you work with companies, you get to know who the hell they are, where they're from. So it's in no way a scientific process, but by the end of the batch, we've got a pretty good idea.
Could you say that again?
How well does YC fund? Yes, this is a great question. How do we deal with work-life balance? So what I'll say is that our opinion on this has actually changed. at least personally, in my 20s, my philosophy was you better fucking crush it. Like, this is time for work. You'll have time to rest when you're old. I don't want to say that my company was particularly functional as a result of that. One of the things that we do now that's actually spearheaded by the batch manager at YC, her name is Amy, is she actually does a talk about founder dynamics. And it's interestingly one of the most popular talks during the batch. And if you kind of strip away all of the like foo-foo language, it's how do you talk to your founder when you're super fucking pissed off at them? And every founding team has this problem. And she just really practically goes through how to do it. And it's really interesting because right after that presentation, like you almost get the feeling like a whole bunch of interesting conversations happen that night, and you get a bunch of emails in the next day being like, that was a great talk. And you're like, I wonder what you guys talked about. But yeah, I think that it's something that we actually, YC's kind of grown to learn much more about. It's much more important. I think it's also, when we were young founders, I think we never believed the idea that it took 10 years to build a large company. And I remember I had this lawyer when I was 23, he was 33, and I was like, you are super old. And he told me that like, it takes 10 years to build a big company, impactful company. And like, I'm at a law firm, we have data, like literally I can show you the data. And I was like, you're old, you don't know what you're talking about. And it took Twitch 8 years to become $1 billion company. And I went out to dinner with him afterwards, and he was 8 years older, and I was 8 years older, and I was like, well, you weren't so old back then, and now you're age. And you were exactly right. And I think that got us to start thinking, at least got me to start thinking a little differently about work-life balance. It's easy to say crush it for a year. Crushing it for 10 years is a little more challenging. What do founders always ask for the other founders doing? Strangely, it's the reverse. I say underrepresented founders are less likely to ask for things. Less likely to ask for intros, advice, etc. There's kind of like this weird, I don't want to depend on someone / I don't want to owe someone. We got a great soundtrack. Which I think is like horrible. It's a piece of the information gap that's missing. Almost every person who's been successful out here has stood on someone else's shoulders. No one's done it by themselves. And oftentimes the story that you read in the press is the PR version that like glosses over all of the shoulders that have been stood on. So that's kind of one of those misconceptions I wish more people understood. What else do we have? Imposter syndrome. How do you deal with imposter syndrome? So the first thing is everyone's got imposter syndrome. So like that's not really a gender or race-based thing. What's interesting about it is two things. At YC, we kind of have this like good cop, bad cop game where we'll say things like, you need to become more formidable. Like great founders become formidable during the time of YC. And PG used to have this line, imagine the 007 version of yourself. 007, it's weird because 007 gets the shit kicked out of him constantly, right? It's not like he's always winning, but he kind of always knows what to do next, and he's always pretty calm about it. And like that's kind of a good model for a founder. On the flip side, we say 95% of the startups that go through YC will die. So literally, you're surrounded by people who are not going to make it. And so we really try to attack imposter syndrome on both sides. It's like, well, everyone in the room sucks, and maybe you can be the one who doesn't. And like, those are the numbers. Like, we love all of them, but like, those are the numbers. So maybe the way we do it is we just tell them, hey, look, you're going to be super lucky if you make it, so you shouldn't feel bad. All right, those are the end of the questions. This has been awesome. We're in the middle of reading YC applications right now, so I have to go back and do that. My email is michael@YCombinator.com, and I'm serious, you can actually email me and I will reply. Feel free to test that out, and I hope I hear from some of you. Cheers.